Illuminati, the secret society that hijacked the world, by investigative journalist Jim Marrs, best-selling author of Rule by Secrecy. The Illuminati. The name Illuminati means the enlightened ones, and usually refers to a person who has been enlightened or illuminated by receiving knowledge from a higher esoteric source. Some believe this name came from a small splinter group of Gnostics in Spain called the Alumbrados, enlightened or illuminated. It was founded by a Spanish Jesuit, Ignatius of Loyola. The Alumbrados taught a form of Gnosticism, believing that the human spirit could attain direct knowledge of God, that the trappings of former religion were unnecessary for those who found the light. It is no wonder that the Spanish Inquisition, instituted by the Catholic Church, issued edicts against this group in 1568, 1574, and 1623. Some believe this name, Illuminati, came from a small splinter group of Gnostics in Spain called the Alumbrados, enlightened or illuminated. Others, such as the Polish philosopher Józef Maria Hohen-Oronsky, writing in the 1800s, believed the Illuminati's history went much further back. The name Illuminati appears to have been introduced only about 1775 by the secret society, which was founded by Weishaupt and developed, it is said, by Baron Niji, I don't know what that is. He wrote, but it must have existed from the greatest antiquity. And actually, the mystic affiliations under the pyramids of Egypt, the esoteric sect of Pythagoras, the astrologers or mathematicians of Rome in the time of Domitian, the House of Wisdom of Cairo, the Ismailis or assassins, companions of the Old Man of the Mountain, the Templars, the Rose Cross, appear to form an uninterrupted chain of these superior affiliations under the name of Luminis. Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, was greatly influenced by older philosophies, and particularly by a merchant known as Kulmer, a man linked to Gnosticism. He was suspected by some researchers to be the same man called Altotas, who was admired and mentioned by the French court magician and revolutionary Alessandro Cagliostro. Both were steeped in the esoteric knowledge of Egypt and Persia. Kulmer preached a secret doctrine based on an ancient form of Gnosticism called Manichaeism or Mandeanism that had used the word illuminated prior to the 3rd century. Kulmer reportedly met Cagliostro on the island of Malta, the old Knights Templar stronghold, while on his way to France and Germany in the early 1770s. Cagliostro, the future French revolutionary, then became involved in Masonic activities with the famed Venetian lover Giovanni Giacomo Casanova, and as well as the mysterious Count of Saint Germain. In Germany, Kulmer passed his secrets along to Weishaupt, who then spent several years determining how to consolidate all occult systems into his new illuminated order. Weishaupt's devotion to the ancient mysteries of Mesopotamia is evidenced by the fact that the Illuminati adopted the old Persian calendar. Although some believe the name Illuminati may have originated in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, it also came to describe early baptized Christians. The Rosicrucians used the term to mean higher levels of initiation. Originally, the stated goals of the Illuminati order appeared benevolent. They were to oppose and to try to stop superstition, prejudice, religious influence over the masses, abuses of government power, and gender inequality. Others, however, saw members of the order as anarchists or descendants of the Knights Templar and the assassins of Hassan bin Sabah, and some as nothing less than worshippers of Satan intent on dominating the world. Due to Weishaupt's outspoken views against the church and royalty and his support of equality and justice, some researchers have suspected that the Illuminati was some sort of proto-communistic organization dedicated to bringing about a proletarian revolution. No one knows their objectives for certain, because any true goal of the Illuminati was hidden due to their extreme secrecy and the compartmentalization of the order. In Germany, Kulmer passed his secrets along to Weishaupt, who then spent several years determining how to consolidate all occult systems. Less than half a dozen people were present at the first meeting of the order, but it grew rapidly, and only a few years later it has chapter houses all over Germany, Austria, France, Italy, Hungary, and Switzerland. Many influential men became members, including noblemen, intellectuals, and progressive politicians. During its life, the Bavarian Illuminati counted among its members many prominent men, including literary giants such as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Johann Gottfried Herder, and even nobles such as the reigning Dukes of Brunswick, Gotha, and Weimar. Other prominent Illuminati included the Grand Duke of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach, Karl August, Duke of Saxe-Gotha and Altenburg, Ernst II, along with his brother and successor Augustus. The Grand Duke of Frankfurt, Karl Theodor Anton Maria von Dalberg, Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick, Wolfenbüttel, the Duke's assistant Johann Friedrich von Schwarz, Count Franz George Karl von Metternich, Imperial Ambassador at Koblenz, the Governor of Galicia, Count Josef Brigido, the Chancellor of Bohemia, Baron Franz Karl Sales-Kressel, with his Vice-Chancellor, Count Leopold Kolevat, a Masonic Grand Master, the Chancellor of Hungary and Transylvania, Count George Biafni von Losnitz, the Ambassador to London, Count Johann Philipp Karl Joseph von Stadion Walthausen, and the Ambassador to Paris, Warsaw, and England, Baron Gottfried von Schweisten. These names mean little to the modern reader, but just know that they were the most educated thinkers of their time and are the ancestors of many of today's European leaders whose bloodlines also reach deep into American society. Famed German author Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whose work gave rise to Romantic literature, is among the prominent literary figures in ancient history who were part of the Illuminati. Membership in the Illuminati grew quickly, especially with the Order's fusion with a group within Freemasonry called the Order of Strict Observance. Also, as the Church and remaining Jesuits moved to restore pre-Enlightenment restrictions on speech and thought, the disaffected among the population proved easy targets for Illuminati recruiters. It was only in the last stages of the Enlightenment age that the philosophies and practices of the past societies, especially those begun in ancient times, came together in the Illuminati. Although the printing press had been around since the mid-15th century, only the educated elites could read and write, since only the wealth, aristocrats, and professionals could afford an education. The great mass of the public was illiterate and susceptible to superstition and manipulation by both church and state. It was left to the educated members of the Rosicrucians and Freemasons to form secret societies for the study of material and knowledge banned by the church and the state. Some recent writers, however, argue that the Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry began as separate philosophies but only merged in the late 18th century with the advent of the Illuminati. The Illuminati, the secret society that hijacked the world, by investigative journalist Jim Marrs, best-selling author of Rule by Secrecy. America, the confidence to start a major revolt in such as the French Revolution may have been gained in the new lands of America. While the American Revolution, which ended 6 years prior to the uprising in France, was not the sole basis for the creation of the secret societies as it was in France, there was nevertheless a definite undercurrent of secret society agitation based on religious and philosophical ideas brought from Europe. The Illuminati had several chapters already in America, and they then and now were accused of conspiring to bring about the American Revolution of 1776. It is certainly true that many of the leading colonists were Freemasons and supporters of the Enlightenment. As noted by the author David Livingstone, America's Constitution itself was inspired by the French Revolution and the ideals of Freemasonry. It enshrines liberty, meaning freedom from the yoke of Christian morality, rules which it attempted to replace with unalienable rights, a concept originally discussed among the secret meetings of the Illuminati. Almost every war and revolution seems to be founded on finance. One little known factor participating in the American Revolution was that in 1764, King George III of England, pressured by the Nathan Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, outlawed the creation of colonial script, the money used by the colonies based on available goods and services. This forced the colonials to sell bonds into indebtedness to the Bank of England and use its banknotes. The colonies would gladly have borne the little tax on tea and other matters had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and the dissatisfaction, wrote Benjamin Franklin. England's King George III's policies towards the American colonies led to the revolution, but it was his ban on colonial script that ignited the rebellion more than the tea tax. The Illuminati and men following their doctrine of fighting political and religious tyranny may have used the outrage at the taxes to further incite rebellion. After all, most of America's founding fathers could be called Illuminati, for they supported, as exemplified by the Constitution, guarantees on personal, political, and religious freedom. And it is certainly true that in the times preceding the American Revolution, it was the secrecy of the Masonic lodges that provided the colonial patriots the opportunity to meet and plan their strategy. The Boston Tea Party was entirely Masonic, carried out by members of St. John's Lodge at later an adjourned meeting. later after an adjourned meeting. Others have identified the lodge as St. Andrew's, but the point is made. There is no documentation to establish if these lodges had been Illuminized. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, only one was not a Freemason. Masonic writer Manly P. Hall, in his book The Secret Teachings of All Ages, told of a most mysterious incident at the time of the signing of the historical document. At the debate over the future of the new country reached a crescendo, and many hesitated to sign the declaration, realizing that they would be putting their life on the line. A tall stranger with a pale face suddenly spoke out. No one knew who he was or where he came from, but the force of his oration was transfixing. His stirring words ended with the cry, "God has given America to be free." Amid emotional cheers, every man rushed forward to sign the declaration, except the stranger. He had disappeared, wrote Hall, nor was he ever again seen again or his identity established. Hall said that this episode paralleled similar incidents in world history when strange unknown men suddenly appeared just in time for the creation of some new nation. Are they coincidences, he asked, or do they demonstrate that the divine wisdom of the ancient mystery still is present in the world, serving mankind as it did of old? In John Robinson's Proof of Conspiracy, he noted that the bannings of the Illuminati in Bavaria was largely a formality, with many members reappearing in raiding societies known as the German Union. He quoted Weishaupt as proclaiming, "I have considered everything and so prepared it, that if the order should this day go to ruin, I shall in a year re-establish it more brilliant than ever." He cleared suspected machinations by the order in America. Following his suppression of Illuminism in 1788, Karl Barth and Baron von Nigi sought to revive it under the name of reading society called the German Union. This hybrid Illuminati soon controlled the publishing and book-selling business in Germany. Such control assured that only the books on religion, philosophy, and politics acceptable to the order would be available to the public. Although this control of reading matter kept Illuminism alive. It was not until 1808 that there was an overt attempt to revive the order in the now established nation of Germany. It was called the Tugendbund, or League of Virtue, and was founded in Prussia by what has been described as a quasi-Masonic secret society in an effort to revive Prussian pride following the Prussians' defeat by Napoleon. Apparently, the Tugendbund was too identifiable with the Illuminati, as it was banned after only a year by Napoleonic decree and by Frederick William III. A similar effort was made via the establishment of the League of the Just, with branches in London, Brussels, Paris, and Switzerland. More on that later. Such control assured that only those books on religion, philosophy, and politics acceptable to the order would be able to be available to the public. The public was inflamed against such efforts, as it was reading a group meeting that attracted attention from the authorized authorities and led to the Illuminati's Zwacks home, where secret papers of the order were discovered. One of these documents was a list of Illuminati lodges existing prior to 1786, a year before the start of the French Revolution. This list identified 5 lodges in Strasbourg, 4 in Bonn, 14 in Austria, many in Livonia, Cordland, Alsace, Hesse, Poland, Switzerland, and Holland, 2 in Warsaw, 8 in England, 2 in Scotland, and even several in North America. But although I cannot consider the German Union as a formal revival of the order under another name, I must hold that those united and the members of those reading societies as Illuminati and Minerval's emphasis in the original. I must consider the German Union as a part of Spartacus's work, concluded Robinson. It also may well have been the transfer of Illuminati's deals of freedom and liberty initiated in Europe, that they were brought back by the officers and men of the French and Hessian soldiers who fought in the American Revolution. Robinson reported that there's officers and soldiers who returned from America imported from the American principles, and in every company found hearers who listened with delight and regret to the fascinating tale of American independence. It may even be that Illuminati ideals were imported to the American colonies long before the Revolution, Tex Mars explained. In the year 1760, Masonic Illuminati agent Stephen Morin came over from France in the New World. By funneling bribes to the U.S. and West Indies politicians, Morin was able to open up dozens of Illuminized Masonic chapters throughout the Americas. In these clandestine lodges, thousands were initiated into the secret order. Then, in 1772, Haym Solomon, who used Rothschild money to further influence American colonial leaders. The result was the American Revolutionary War against King George's Great Britain. Warnings against the Illuminati Illuminati come from many quarters. Professor Robinson, utilizing the order's own internal papers, saw clearly in his mind that the organization was created for the express purpose of rooting out all the religious establishments and overturning all existing governments of Europe. The Reverend Jedediah Morse, an ardent Federalist, in his sermon cited from Robinson's book and warned of an Illuminati conspiracy in America. On May 9th, 1798, Morse, in a sermon at the New North Church in Boston, addressed the Illuminati by proclaiming practically all of the civil and ecclesiastical establishments of Europe have already been shaken to their foundations by this terrible organization. The French Revolution itself is doubtless to be traced to its machinations. The success of the French armies are to be explained on the same ground. The Jacobins are nothing more or less than the open manifestation of the hidden systems of the Illuminati. The order has its branches established and its emissaries at work in America. The affiliated Jacobin societies in America have doubtless had the object of their establishment the propagations of the principles of the Illuminated Mother Club in France. In his last sermon on the Illuminati, Morse sounded much like Senator Joe McCarthy 150 years later by claiming to have an official authenticated list of the names, ages, places of nativity, professions, and corpus of the officers, members of a society of Illuminati, or as they are now more generally and properly styled, Illuminis, emphasis in the original, consisting of 100 members instituted in Virginia by the Grand Orient of France. It turned out that his proof of Illuminati infiltration was merely a congratulatory letter from Wisdom Lodge number 2660 in Portsmouth, Virginia, warranted by the Grand Orient of France to the newly constituted Union Lodge number 14 in New York, warranted by the Grand Orient of New York, where the letter had been provided by a Federalist Party official intended to discredit Republicans. Morse's claims were controversial even at the time, and when he could not substantiate his assertions, he was ridiculed and nothing was heard of him until the rise of the anti-Masonic Party, yet fear of the Illuminati continued unabated in the new nation. According to author Rev. Duan El Ualdi, even after the founding of the United States, the Illuminati attempted to export Jacobin-style revolution to the infinite United States. The United States was established as a constitutional republic in 1789, the same year that the Illuminati's devastation of France begun. Shortly thereafter, agents of the Illuminati, such as French agitator Edmond Charles Genet, the French ambassador to America, began organizing insurrectionary and secessionist movements to destroy the American Republic. Their efforts were delayed by widespread public exposure, thanks in no small measure to George Washington, who condemned the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati. According to some researchers, Genet's real purpose was to gain political favor for France while spreading Illuminism throughout the establishment of democratic clubs. John Quincy Adams, who later became a U.S. president, reportedly organized the New England Masonic Lodges. About 1807, Adams wrote the 3 letters to Colonel William C. Stone, a ranking Mason, charging that Thomas Jefferson using the Masonic Lodges to subversive Illuminati purposes. David Allen Rivera, author of Final Warning, A History of the New World Order, claimed these letters were allegedly kept at the Rittenberg Square Library in Philadelphia, but have since mysteriously vanished. Adams had written earlier to Washington saying that Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton were misusing the Masonic lodges for Illuminati purposes and to worship of Lucifer, which is recorded in the Adams Chronicles. In 1798, the Reverend G.W. Snyder sent Robinson's book to former President George Washington, requesting his thoughts on the matter of the order's activities. In a reply, Washington wrote, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am. This idea that I mean to convey was that I did not believe that the lodges of the Freemasons in this country had, as societies, endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenets of the first or pernicious principles of the latter if they are susceptible of separation. That individuals of them may have done it, or that the founder or instrument employed to found the democratic societies in the United States may have these objects and actually had a separation of the people from their governments in view. It is too evident to be questioned. I have heard much of the nefarious, dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. The fact is, I presided over none, nor have I been in one more than once or twice within the last 30 years. I believe, notwithstanding, that none of the lodges in this country are contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati. Washington, while not denying that the doctrines of the Illuminati had spread to the new nation, apparently believed it was only the work of certain individuals and not the official agenda of clubs or parties to include his fellow Freemasons. But if it seemed that Washington was trying to distance himself from the Illuminati, such was not the case with founding fathers and author of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. In an 1800s letter, Jefferson wrote a defense of Weishaupt, stating, "As Weishaupt lived under the tyranny of a despot and priest, he knew that caution was necessary even in spreading information, and the principles of pure morality. This has given an air of mystery to his views, was the foundation of his banishment. If Weishaupt had written here, where no secrecy is necessary in our endeavors to render men wise and virtuous, he would not have thought of any secret machinery for that purpose." Jefferson, a Freemason and founding father who would become president the next year, wrote in 1800 to Bishop James Madison in Philadelphia about his thoughts on Barruel's anti-Illuminati book. He almost appeared to exhibit admiration for Weishaupt as he wrote, "I have lately by accident got a sight of a single volume, of the Abbe Barruel's Antisocial Conspiracy, which gives me the first idea I have over what is meant to be the Illuminatism against which Illuminate Morse, he is now called, and his ecclesiastical monarchical associates have been making such a hue and cry. Barruel's own part of the books are perfectly the ravagings of a bedlamite inmates of infamous London insane asylum, but he quotes largely from Weishaupt, whom he considers the founders of what he calls the order. As you may not have had an opportunity of forming a judgment of this cry of mad dog which has been raised against his doctrines, I will give you the idea I have formed from only an hour's reading of Barruel's quotations from him, which you may be sure are not the most favorable. Weishaupt seems to be an enthusiastic philanthropist. He is among those who believe in the indefinite perfectibility of man. He thinks that it may in time be rendered so perfect that he will be able to govern himself in every circumstance so as to injure none, to do all good as he can, to leave government no occasion to exercise their powers over him, and of course to render political government useless. This, as you know, is what Robertson, Barruel, and Morse had called a conspiracy against all government. Weishaupt believes that to promote this perfection of the human character was the object of Jesus Christ, that his intentions was simply to reinstate natural religion, and by diffusing the light of his morality to teach us to govern ourselves, his precepts are the love of God and the love of our neighbor. And by teaching innocence of conduct, he expected to place men in their natural state of liberty and equality. He says no one ever laid a surer foundation for liberty than our Grand Master, Jesus of Nazareth. He believes the Freemasons were originally possessed of the true principles and objects of Christianity, and have still preserved some of these by tradition, but much disfigured. This means he proposes to effect this improvement of human nature or to enlighten men to correct their morals and inspire them with benevolence. Secure of our success, and says he, we abstain from violence commotions, to have foreseen the happiness of posterity, and to have prepared by it irreproachable means suffices for our felicity. The tranquility of our consequences is not troubled by the reproach of aiming at the ruin of overthrow or state of thrones. As Weishaupt lived under the tyranny of a despot priest, he knew that caution was necessary even in spreading information, and the principle of pure morality. He proposed, therefore, to lead the Freemasons to adopt this object to make the object of their institution the diffusion of science and virtue. He proposed to initiate new members into his body graduations proportion to his fears of the thunderbolts of tyranny. This has given an air of mystery to his views, was the foundation of his banishment, the subversion of the Masonic order, and is the color for the ravings against him of Robinson, Barruel, and Morse, whose real fears are that the craft would be endangered by the spreading of misinformation, reason, and natural morality among men. The Federalists under Alexander Hamilton had spread the rumor that Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican Party were puppets of the European Illuminati, and judging from Jefferson's letter, either Jefferson lacked knowledge of the inner Illuminati teachings, which is hard to believe, or the Federalists were correct in charging him with being the secret member of the order. Although no concrete evidence has been made public that Jefferson was an Illuminatist, from the writings of both he and Franklin, it appears that they both were familiar with the ideals of the Rosicrucians and hence the Illuminati. At George Washington's inauguration in 1789, the oath of office was administered by Robert Livingston, Grand Master of the New York Grand Lodge. On September 18, 1793, Washington dedicated the U.S. Capitol. Author David Livingston described this Masonic ceremony, writing, "Dressed in Masonic apron, the president placed a silver plate on the cornerstone and covered it with the Masonic symbols of corn, oil, and wine. The plane of the city was Washington, D.C. Itself was designed by Freemasons and architect Pierre Charles Infante, in the form of a pentagram or five-pointed star. In 1848, in a Masonic ceremony, the cornerstone was laid of the Washington Monument, an obelisk or pillar like those formerly dedicated to the dying gods of the ancient Middle East. And every president of the United States since independence has purportedly been a 33rd degree Freemasonry. The question left unanswered was how many of the Masonic lodges involved in the revolution and its successful aftermath had been Illuminized. Some wages have even been proposed that the Washington identity was surreptitiously taken by none other than Adam Weishaupt. It's true that Weishaupt's activities after 1790 are disputed, with various versions offered of his following the outlawing of his order. Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson in their trilogy Illuminati suggested that Weishaupt traveled to America, murdered George Washington, and assumed his persona. In part one, they quoted from a small left-wing newspaper in Chicago stating, "No historian knows what happened to Adam Weishaupt after he was exiled from Bavaria in 1785. The possibility that Adam Weishaupt killed George Washington and took his place, serving as our first president for 2 terms, is now confirmed. The 2 main colors of the American flag are, excluding a patch of blue in one corner, red and white. There are also the official colors of the Hashanism, the Assassins. The Hashishism, the flag, and the Illuminati pyramid both have 13 horizontal divisions. 13, of course, is the traditional code for marijuana and is still used in that sense by Hell's Angels, among others. Now, Washington formed the Federalist Party, the other major party in those holidays. The Democratic Republicans was formed by Thomas Jefferson, and there are grounds for accepting the testimony of the Reverend Jedediah Morris of Charleston, who accused Jefferson of being an Illuminati agent. Thus, even at the dawn of our government, both parties were Illuminati fronts. In spite of the fact that his face appears on billions of stamps and dollar bills, and his portrait hangs in every public building in the country, no one is quite sure what Washington looks like. Contemporary portraits of the first president do not seem to even be the same man. Some of the portraits can be found in Encyclopedia Britannica, when the resemblance to portraits of Weishaupt is undeniable. One critic of this Washington substitution theory astutely observed, Washington took command of the Continental Army on July 3rd, 1775, and the war lasted 5 years. The Bavarian Illuminati was founded allegedly in 1776. Either George grew wings and quickly flew to Germany during a break and from tactical maneuvers, or Weishaupt, newly arrived from Germany, was for some reason given command of the Continental Army. George would have been the first general up to that era to travel across the ocean and back, takes a while each way, while managing a revolutionary army facing a relatively superior enemy. Shea and Wilson ultimately put the kibosh on our own theory of Weishaupt substituting for the father of our country. They correctly pointed out that while Washington was cultivating his hemp crop, Adam Weishaupt was very definitively still in Bavaria, teaching canon law at the University of Ingolstadt. In tune with the psychedelic 1960s, Shea and Wilson did connect Washington with the Illuminati, in that both reportedly smoked marijuana for medicinal and hallucinatory benefits. They noted that separating male from female hemp plants is not required for the production of hemp rope, but is absolutely necessary if one wants to use the flowering tips of the female for marijuana. Indeed, Washington's diary entry for August 7th, 1765 read, "Began to separate the male from the female hemp rather too late." This indicated he wanted to separate the male from the female, increasing potency fertilization. Some researchers have suggested that the British looted and burned Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812 to destroy incriminating documents exposing treason against the United States by Illuminati operatives within the government. The followers of Thomas Jefferson, known as Jeffersonian Republicans, were anti-monarchy and anti-federalist. They were divided in 1796 when members of those advocating states' rights, farming interests, and more democratic procedures became Democratic Republicans. In 1826, they became known simply as Democrats, and in 1854, the National Republicans shortened their name to just Republicans. This 2-major party system has remained until today. By the time of the war between the states, much of the secret society machinations had been forgotten by the American public thanks to the anti-Masonic movement of the early 1800s. It is historical fact that for some years, the Rothschild financial supporters of the Illuminati had financed major projects in the United States on both the sides of the Mason-Dixie line. Nathan Rothschild, who owns a larger Manchester textile plant, bought his content from Southern interests and financed the importation of the southern cotton prior to the war. At the same time, wrote Rothschild biographer Wilson, he had to make loans to various states of the Union, had been for a time the official European banker for the U.S. government, and was the pledged supporter of the Bank for the United States. Rothschild's interest in North America reached back at least far as 1837, when a German-born representative of the Rothschild banking empire arrived in the United States and changed his name from the August Schoenberg to August Belmont. He was rumored to be an illegitimate Rothschild himself. Whatever the truth, Belmont was in daily correspondence with the Rothschilds and became their acknowledged representative in the United States. With no apparent capital of his own, Belmont soon was buying up government and bonds, and within a few short years had created one of the largest banking firms in the nation. August Belmont and Company. Thanks to Belmont's aggressive business tactics, the Rothschilds soon had American investment in industry, banks, and railroads, federal and state bonds, tobacco, cotton, and of course gold. Belmont was instrumental in later financing both North and South during the Rebellion. He strongly influenced bankers in both England and France to support the Union War against the purchase of government bonds. At the same time, he quietly bought up the increasing worthless bank bonds of the South in great discounts, with the idea that the South would be forced to honor them in full at the war. Solomon Rothschild, one of the younger family members, visited America on the onset of war, was openly pro-Confederate. As their agent, Belmont was pro-Union. Rothschild disparaged President Lincoln, stated he rejects all form of compromise and thinks only of repression by force of arms. He has the appearance of peasants and can only tell barroom stories. The idea that the machinations behind America's sectional war were instigated by the European financial elite was confirmed by German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, and division of the United States into federations of equal force was decided long before the Civil War by the high financial powers of Europe. These bankers were afraid that the United States, if they remained in one bloc as one nation, would attain economic and financial independence, which would upset their financial domination over the world. The voice of the Rothschilds prevailed. Therefore, they sent their emissaries into the field to exploit the question of slavery and to open abyss between the two sections of the Union, proclaimed Bismarck. If the gambit indeed was to split the Republic into two and regain North America for European bankers, presidential aspirations, Abraham Lincoln saw it clearly. He often tried to explain that his goal was to save the American Union, not to emancipate the slaves. During his famous debate with Stephen Douglas in 1858, Lincoln made his personal position on race quite clear. I will say then that I am not, nor have ever been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races, as I, much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. Anti-slavery advocates in both North and South realized the technological advances meant to the demise of slavery was only a matter of time. But extremists on both sides, encouraged by agents of the European financiers, continually fanned the fires of discontent. One leader of this agitation came from the yet another secret society, the Knights of the Golden Circle, a secret society founded by surgeon and author George W. L. Brickley, who in 1854 built his first knightly castle in Cincinnati, Ohio. Brickley drew liberally from the rites and rituals of Freemasonry. The Knights have similar passwords, handshakes, and temples to serve in meeting halls for their lesser grand and supreme councils. According to author G. Edward Griffin, the KGC had close ties with a secret society in France called the Seasons, which itself was a branch of the Illuminati. The name Knights of the Golden Circle was derived from a grandiose plan to create a huge slaveholding empire of 2,400 miles, 3,826 kilometers, or 62 kilometers, in circumference, with Cuba as the center point. This new nation was to include the southern United States, Mexico, part of Central America, and the West Indies in order to gain a monopoly over the world's supply of tobacco, sugar, rice, and coffee. Historian Shelby Foote used the term Jacobins to describe the secessionists of the era, disruptors of the established social, religious, and political order, who had been operating in America since the late 1700s. The Jacobins and their form of Illuminized Freemasonry were the collective tissue that tied the secret societies of the Old World to hidden manipulations of the New World. They had crossed the Atlantic after successfully destroying the Old World Order in France and were looking for new worlds to conquer. These fugitives were former members of the offspring of members of elder secret societies, including the outlawed Bavarian Illuminati, which traces its origins back to the dawn of humankind. Even the assassin of President Lincoln, Southern sympathizer John Wilkes Booth, was a known member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, along with the famous outlaw Jesse James and Sam Houston. Various conspiracy researchers have connected both to the Illuminati, the Italian Carbonari, and through fellow Knights Templar Judah Benjamin, who was the Secretary of State for the Confederacy to the House of Rothschild. After the war, Benjamin, often called the sinister power behind the throne of Confederate President was often called the sinister power behind the throne. Of Confederate President Jefferson Davis fled to England, where he became a successful attorney, reportedly representing the Rothschilds. Benjamin's mentor was U.S. Senator John Slidell of Louisiana, whose niece married Rothschild agent August Belmont. Benjamin's connection to Slidell further connected Benjamin to European banking, which funded the Confederacy. As previously mentioned, the Rothschild has established a central bank system in the major European nations since the late 18th century. The idea of a central bank providing cheap credit and expendable money to commercial interest was pushed through the Continental Congress in 1781 by Congressman Robert Morris, a Philadelphia financier born in England who initially voted against the Declaration of Independence, yet whose firm, Willing and Morris, profited handsomely by trading in arms and loans to the fledgling American government. Along with Federalist Alexander Hamilton, who was called Morris's youthful disciple, the pair was instrumental in scrapping the old Articles of Confederation in favor of a new constitution, which essentially established an American system of mercantilism, big government, copied after that of England, under which the colonists had just rebelled. Morris was able to create the first central bank in America, the Bank of North America. When this enterprise failed only after 3 years, it was Hamilton, by Secretary of the Treasury, who created a second central bank, the first Bank of the United States, which Jefferson and his followers strongly opposed. Hamilton's bank, like that of Morris, was closely modeled after the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England and created a partnership between the governments and banking interests. 20% of the bank's capital was obtained through the federal government, with the remaining 80% pledging by private investors, including foreigners such as the Rothschilds. Under the influence of the Rothschilds, Under the surface, the Rothschilds had a powerful influence in dictating American financial laws. The law records show that they were the power in the old Bank of the United States, wrote author Gustav Myers. Although no direct evidence can be found that Hamilton was a Rothschild agent, the fact that he acted to establish a private bank in America certainly indicates his fealty to the European bank system. And as a supporter of a federal bank in his founding of the Federalist Party in 1751, it is evident he was working for the banking elite. Hamilton worked against the ideals of the Founding Fathers. Both today and at the time, many felt Hamilton's monetary policy was unconstitutional and based on fraudulent statements. Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, and other supporters of Republican government fought Hamilton's banking system and his federalism, as it seems evident that the Illuminati connected European bankers and their New World associates were trying to gain control over America's money supply. It is especially fascinating to note that the first assassination attempt on a U.S. president was against Andrew Jackson, who in 1836 ended the effort to establish a central bank, claiming it was unconstitutional and a curse to a republic, inasmuch as it is calculated to raise around the administration a moneyed aristocracy dangerous to the liberties of the country. America's first assassination attempt of a president was made on Jackson in 1835 by a man named Richard Lawrence, whom pistol misfired. Lawrence claimed to be in touch with the powers in Europe. 2 U.S. presidents who issued debt-free currency, Lincoln in 1862 and John F. Kennedy in 1963, were also assassinated under controversial circumstances. It should be noted that Jackson was a Freemason, which indicated that his masonry, unlike that of the Illuminized European Masons, was not under the thrall of the international banking elite who had used Freemasonry as a cover for their Illuminati ideals. If indeed the war between the United States was a plot to split the United States by the secret societies, as claimed by a Knights of the Golden Circle tract published in 1861 and backed by the European Rothschilds, it's very nearly succeeded. In the fall of 1863, France and Britain, both badly needing southern cotton for their textile mills, came dangerously close to both recognizing and militarily aiding the South. It was Russia's pro-North Tsar Alexander II who tipped the balance. After receiving information that England and France, pending an ended rebellion in North America, were plotting war to divide up the Russian Empire, Alexander ordered 2 Russian fleetings to the United States, one anchored off the coast of Virginia, while the other rested in San Francisco. Both were in perfect position to attack British and French commercial shipping lines. No threat or ultimatums were made public. It was clear that should war come, the Russian Navy was in a position to wreak havoc. Faced with the possibility of World War I, a half-century before they were ready, the leaders of France and Britain hesitated, and the South, running out of money, manpower, and materials, was devastated. Adding insult to this loss were the harsh Reconstruction policies of the Republican government, which caused the South to suffer under punitive economic policies well into the 1960s. Reconstruction generated endured hatred and bitterness into the 20th century, as well as the growth of other secret societies in the South, such as the Ku Klux Klan. It should be recalled that well into the 1960s, 1960s, there were no Republicans, only Democrats in the Solid South. The men who created societies such as the Klan, Knights of the Golden Circle, and the Thule Society and Cecil Rhodes Roundtable groups drew from a long history of clandestine European organizations. Eric Dubai, an American yoga teacher living in Thailand, is author of The Atlantean Conspiracy. After researching the New World Order, he concluded, before the Revolutionary War, the New World of the Americas lacked unity and autonomous identity. For almost 300 years, there was no military, constitution, or federal government. Then, within 2 short years, the snap of a historical finger, America had Continental Marines, Continental Congress, and the Articles of Confederation. Within the Declaration of Independence, the British colonial Americans officially separated from the British nationalists. Freemasons and bloodline General George Washington became first president of the now United States of America, and royal rule of America switched from overt to covert. Royal and secret societies ruled had not changed, only the perception of government changed while the same DNA stayed in office. Instead of peasants well aware of their plight, knowing the monarch's emperors oppressing them, we became peasants who actually believed we were born into a free and open system.